I will kick off here. My name is Martin Burrows. I'm from Symetri. I'm hosting this session, and I'm very happy to have Nick John, visualization expert at Symetri, with me, and also Tim Fleming, the founder of Future Visual. My role in the session here will be as a moderator to basically keep track of the chat, see if there are any questions and answers. Then I'll make sure that Nick and Tim gets to know about the questions. Also, my role is to make sure that we keep time. So in order to keep the time, then we'll kick off right away. Welcome, Tim and Nick. It's all yours.
Thank you, Martin. So obviously, welcome to day 2 of the Nordic BIM Summit, and thank you for choosing to spend time with us on the disruption breakout session today. So obviously, our presentation is going to be about visualization and the technologies and tools that we've employed over the last, I guess, few years, really, and how this can affect your ability to communicate within your businesses. But I'd like to start today by kind of referencing what we ended with yesterday, which was this discussion about the I in BIM. So I think we'd all agree that information is useless if it's siloed and it can't be shared between the appropriate stakeholders with confidence and with accuracy. And typically, whenever there is a lack of information or impaired communication, misunderstanding and error normally fills that void. So in this presentation, we are going to be talking about visualization and how it offers an alternative and often enhanced method of communication, especially when we consider contemporary challenges such as the pandemic, ESG, globally distributed teams, and even Generation Z entering the workforce is a consideration. But I'm also going to share the framework that we often use within my team at Symetri to measure disruption. How do we identify a specific innovation or a specific tool set or technology that we should investigate? Because I think it's very important that we all have a framework to help measure these disruptions. So just a quick intro to myself. My name's Nick. I'm the ID&V manager, as Martin said, at Symetri. My background is in industrial design, but I now look after Symetri's automotive division. I've spent around 10 years working with OEMs as a subject matter expert for companies like JLR, McLaren, Bentley, Volvo, and Polestar. But I also work very closely with our AEC clients and help them kind of support their innovation strategies as well. So my job is essentially focused on developing digital design and visualization strategies to help our clients navigate this ever-changing digital landscape. I'll just hand you over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, good to meet you all. My name is Tim Fleming. I'm the co-founder of Future Visual. Future Visual was founded in 2015, specifically as an immersive and spatial computing company. My background has always been in graphics and hardware. I started as an animator at Silicon Studio and worked throughout live production, high-end graphics throughout my career. And the last 6 years been working exclusively on immersive, and look forward to showing you a couple of examples of that.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Tim. So the agenda we're going to have is very straightforward. I'm going to talk about future-proofing and how to categorize disruptions, because I think we're in a good position, Tim and myself, to talk about this, because visualization moves very quickly. Lots of tools, technologies, democratization of very expensive technology 10 years ago, which you can becomes, I guess, consumerized in a very quick amount of time. I'm also going to talk about how a visualization strategy can facilitate improved communication. And if we get enough time, we'll do a Q&A and a small discussion at the end. But let's talk about future-proofing and kind of avoiding single points of failure to start off with. So whenever we talk about future-proofing, this could be across the board, but we are going to focus on visualization here. But people often talk about how you can embrace disruption when it arrives. But in reality, I think companies should try to be proactive, and this goes for all of us. We should try to anticipate the future, and we should try to develop methods to minimize the shocks and stresses of these future events. Because it's not always possible to embrace disruption when it arrives, because it can be like a wave. It can be very, very quick and disrupt everything. Now, I don't say this because we're all still experiencing the pandemic and it's fresh in our minds. I say this because if we take a step back and look over the last 10, 20, 30 years in historical events, it's really important to understand that disruption is actually accelerating and will continue to do so moving forward. My team, we try to adopt something called the kind of Gartner and Accenture strategy, which is to recognize, prioritize, and respond to disruption appropriately. So once you recognize that something is going to take place, how do you prioritize the action that you're going to take over things that you might currently be doing within your organizations? And then this will help you to develop your kind of response. So essentially, future-proofing is less about developing a single robust source or process within your business that is unshakable. It's about assuming that there will continue to be change and then building a flexible and agile system to respond accordingly. So I think we're all very familiar with this image. So in hindsight, it's often very easy to identify single points of failure in our processes. And I think communication is one of these things, which is a slightly different one. So fundamentally, communication is the exchange of ideas, solutions, wisdom, experience between two or more parties. Communication is essentially the oxygen of our companies. But when communication is severed or impaired in some way, shape or form, we wouldn't have believed, for example, that the pandemic would affect our communication and impact us for such a prolonged way, for a kind of unforeseen event. No one really saw this coming. But what the pandemic did highlight is that when our ability to communicate and collaborate is impaired, so does the kind of efficiency of our business. Every single decision that's made across our entire business is also impaired in some way, shape or form. So for me, for my teams and for the companies that we support, it's become abundantly clear that relying or becoming overly reliant on traditional physical on-site in-person reviews, stakeholder meetings, it's a very kind of fragile workflow. And I think we should all be exploring digital alternatives or a digital equivalent that can allow you to maintain communication and collaboration regardless of the environment. So although Zoom, Teams and other platforms have been brilliant over the course of the last 18 months, this is exactly where a visualization strategy can come into play for your businesses to avoid a single point of failure for communication within your business. So as promised, I said I'd talk about how we categorize disruption, or how I get my team to categorize disruption. And we use this framework really. There's three different types of change, which I think people often regard as disruption, but not all of them are. We have features, we have fads, and we have what would be regarded as true disruption. So in this graph, across the bottom, you can see the different kind of personas, the innovators, the adopters, the early majority, and then the laggards at the end. And going up the chart, that's the shocks and stresses to the system. So if I start off with features, features is additional capability. This is added to the existing stack, and it results in something that evolves every year. Features may or may not be used, but they're always consistent. They're cumulative, they grow over time. And an example could be the software that we use. It could be your Revit licenses. It could be your smartphone, for example, how you update the operating system. And as you can see, it often starts off with those innovators, and then the early adopters, and then the late majority. And then when the excitement dies out, the laggards pick it up and it becomes mainstream. Then we have fads. This is often misinterpreted as a true disruption. But a fad comes in at the innovator stage. It's often driven by a single big societal trigger, something that happens that makes a community very excited. They can have a large impact on that community and then disappear very quickly and reduce the impact. It's something that never fully takes across the entire market. An example could be something like Pokemon Go, had a big impact in terms of AR, but not to the kind of wider market. But we're not talking about either of these two things when we're talking about true disruption. So true disruption is something that comes from multiple triggers. And I think this was discussed yesterday quite a lot. So it could be societal, economic, a big macro trend. It could be climate change. But essentially, when we get into this early majority stage, there is a big spike in interest, a big shock to the system. And it has a real kind of meaningful impact to the intended audience and also beyond. Unlike fads, true disruption is a fundamental shift in behavior, and it remains in place until something else disrupts it. So an example might be how streaming has replaced broadcast television, or how electric vehicles and mobility as a service will, in my particular part of the business, replace a lot of the traditional automotive business models. So as I said before, we find ourselves at this multiple triggers stage: climate change, sustainability, digitization, and the change in market expectation. So whenever we are evaluating events that are on the horizon, try to remove yourself from the noise, try to evaluate what looks like a disruptive event and qualify it based on this framework because it works very, very well to help you do that prioritize and respond stage of things. But we need to also look at things in, I guess, context, historical context. So we've got this disruption scale. So on the left-hand side, we've got the contemporary disruptions I'm going to talk about in a moment. And on the right-hand side, we've got all those historical equivalents. And it allows me to be quite methodical in the way that we evaluate and compare the two. It's a really good way to gauge what disruptions to recognize, prioritize, and respond. So because we're all in the pandemic at the minute, it feels like this is a revolutionary scenario. But in reality, I think we probably should be looking at something like COVID-19 as a transformational event. The reason why I wouldn't say it's revolutionary is because if I'm from Southeast Asia, Japan, China, Taiwan, you've probably had 3 or 4, 5 pandemics in the last 20 to 25 years. This one being global, yes, it's affected us all, but I wouldn't say it's quite as disruptive as something like climate change, which can be, you know, a once in a millennia event and something that will affect everybody. And in my part of the business in automotive, it's very clear that we're changing everything that we do. And then we also have things like ESG. This is an extension. We talked about capital and investments and how your company is perceived by the market, but yeah, very important. These are contemporary societal disruptions that we should all be aware of when it comes to communication. But then from a technology standpoint, we look at the digital disruption. So what technologies are available right now, which we feel are going to massively influence the way in which we communicate and our ability to communicate and what the expectation would be. And believe it or not, BIM is a massive part of that because everyone is now 3D rich, content rich. We need to share more data, and PDFs and Teams aren't necessarily going to be the right platform to do so. So I kind of extend this to get people to look at things like digital twin, the metaverse. XR is essentially extended reality for those who may not be aware, but this is an umbrella term for AR, virtual reality, and mixed reality. But virtual reality or XR collaboration has been a huge positive for us over the course of the pandemic, and the clients that have embraced this have been able to communicate frictionlessly, essentially, throughout the pandemic and maintain projects very, very effectively. And then democratization, which is how the price point has come down and made things accessible for everyone. So these are things which we've kind of embraced, and I thought it'd be interesting to show you how some of my organizations, and yes, this is automotive, but automotive also includes factory design, AEC, not just the car itself. And using the tools and technologies available, we've been able to effectively continue to review, evaluate, and maintain projects as we would do as if we were in the office or in a centralized location. So in this particular example, we had people from 3 different continents reviewing the same vehicle at the same time, but also reviewing the showroom and reviewing the factory. The benefit of this: no shipping, no storage, no insurance, no hotels, no travels, no meals. And when you kind of put this in the prism of ESG and sustainability, this has a really big impact on the way in which we design and engineer products. And then if we look at some of the technology available now, and I'm going to concentrate on Vario for an example, a Nordic company who make one of the best headsets, or if not the best headset on the market. This is an example of how mixed reality can allow us to overlay digital experiences in a physical environment to facilitate better collaboration. Now, I'm looking at a vehicle here, but unfortunately I'm under NDA, but we've looked at whole cityscapes. We've looked at how that vehicle interacts with a smart city, and we've walked around environments together with our teams. And it's really interesting to just appreciate that these technologies are available, they're accessible. And when you create a sort of cost-benefit analysis to traditional communication methods, flights and travel, it comes out on top on almost every single metric. So I'd like to kind of hand over now to Tim, if that's okay, to talk about some of the technologies that he and his company have created and used on the visualization spectrum.
Great.
Let me know if you're okay with that, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And really good to hear what you guys have been up to. So that's some really interesting context for some of what I'm about to talk to. just looking for how I get control of the slide deck, Nick. Oh, you're on mute.
Use the slide deck or use YouTube?
If you continue to use the slide deck to begin.
No problem. I'll get that back up. Apologies.
Excellent.
So if you just go to the next slide. Great. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for the intro. So my company, Future Visual, we started in sort of high risk, high value training environments. We have a product called Vision XR, which is pertinent to the discussion we're having here. And Vision XR, essentially what it does is it enables people on using VR, AR, desktop or mobile to collaborate simultaneously, all in the same space together. Originally, when we started, we were focusing on these high-risk environments because our sort of guiding star at Future Visual has always been providing access to situations and scenarios that are either physically impossible or prohibitively expensive to create in real life. And the reason why that sort of guiding star has remained resonant, whichever project or whichever bits of tech we worked on, is for a number of the reasons Nick just outlined. Being able to have access to cityscapes, to walk around those with your team, to bring people together into one location, into environments or factories that haven't been fabricated yet. And it allows a whole level of risk-taking, of design planning and experimentation that wouldn't be available without this functionality. And the way we see Vision XR is it really provides a seamless virtual layer to your office. So if you're working in a large company, excuse me, and you've got 10 international offices, then something like Vision XR or this spatial layer is an always-on, extendable virtual layer to your entire organization that teams can drop in and out of at any moment. And what I'll do is I'll play a quick clip here. It'll just give you an idea of how a Vision XR in action. Particularly look how people, even if they're on mobile devices or using AR devices, they can still affect what's going on in the scene. One of our reasons, I know I said I was about to play the video, I'll do that in a sec. One of the reasons we're so keen on making sure everyone on any device can access it, because we all spend so much time building these incredible bits of content, and we don't want access to hardware to be a barrier. So we want people to be able, on the move, to be able to drop into this virtual layer at any time. So I'll just play a quick clip now. Here we go, YouTube.
Where does this go?
It's over there.
Hey Ben, can you take this from me? That's the front engine cowling.
I want you to take a look at the compressor. Okay.
You should see me if you look up to your left.
The air comes through here, gets compressed.
Hey guys, I'm going to open the engine now.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Excellent, impressive. Martin here. We, from a timekeeping perspective, we need to wrap it up now. We got a few minutes before the next session starts. Back to you, Tim.
Okay. I'm gonna have to rattle through things pretty fast. Okay. Can you just go on to the next slide then, please, Nick? Okay, how do I get this? Stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. Actually, sorry. Previous slide. Okay, great. So part of what you saw in that film is the capabilities. So you can see here we've got something called the X-ray tool that allows people to push through geometry. You actually also saw someone on that last shot in the mobile, just opening and closing the engine. So really it's about being able to provide kind of design tools that feel very tangible and at scale that are difficult to do in real life. And as we are in the mode of wrapping up, I won't play you any more films, but if you just go through to the next slide, please, Nick. And to give you a bit more context, I'm sure you've all seen lots of these kind of design or interior type packages. This is one we did for John Lewis, but it has the real-time lighting solution, so we're able to like move the sun around, so you can see how the various sort of furnishings and interior paintings and paints all kind of work together. So this was actually in lieu of them having this new product range at every store. Again, it was providing that virtual layer. And if you can go to the next slide, please, Nick. So this is a project we did for IATA, which was around obviously ground crew training. And again, the proposition here was, can we enable ground crew to have access to lots of different aircraft types, lots of different environmental conditions. So they had daytime, nighttime, high visibility, low visibility, and about being able to simulate accidents and risks that are difficult to simulate in real life. And in the context of putting them in using Vision XR, ground crew and operations is very much about how the team works. So we were able to simulate your team errors, your teammates making errors, and did you as an individual pick up on that? So this is kind of quite a high level of sort of error training. You know, it's not just your own actions, it's how do you work in the context of the team. And again, normally having access to aircraft, normally having access to the apron just doesn't happen at the moment. And I'll just do one more slide. If you can just forward, Nick, thank you. And just to completely sort of change your perspective from BIM or industrial training, we've actually used Vision XR for esports audience experiences. So this is what the future of the stadium experience might look like, is rather than actually having to go to the stadium or watch the cast on Twitch or YouTube, you've got like these private VIP rooms with data-driven maps and all the video feeds from the game itself. So this is really sort of pushing the imagination. You know, the metaverse is emerging. We are seeing this overlap of digital and physical events. So it's a very exciting time to be working in visualization.
Tim.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, and thanks for keeping the time. I'm sorry that the time slot was so tight. The presentations, of course, will be shared both from the recording, but also if the audience wants to have the physical the PowerPoint presentation with contact information and so on, that's definitely possible. And with this, I would like to wrap up. There's one next session will start in 1 minute. So everyone, big thanks to Nick and Tim. And go back into the session room and pick the session for the 10 o'clock session, and then we'll go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.